What's up, Sports Spectrum? It's Matt Forte here with my man Jason Romano, as always, and we have Javien Elliott on the podcast today, who played for a few years, undrafted, went into the NFL, but played for a few years for the Buccaneers and also for the Carolina Panthers, and played a little bit in CFL as well. But man, he has an amazing testimony and a story, and a little bit to not to pat myself on the back, but I helped to baptize this young man at a PAO conference,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it was amazing. So he's also an author. We have 3 authors on this podcast right now, which hasn't. I don't think we've ever had that. We've had 2. Well, no, maybe we have had 3. I guess a couple guys had books coming out, but Jason has wrote a few books. I have written a book. I actually have one that's going to be coming out in 2025 as well. But
Nice.
Wow,
Javien's
breaking
book.
news here, Matt. I didn't even
Nice.
know about
Yeah,
that.
that's
Oh, you
nice.
didn't know about that? Well, yeah, I got a book coming out, another one, and I did the
Right.
children's book. Now I got to do something that's more for the our community as far as pro athletes and also adults as well. So,
Okay.
but Javien wrote a book called Unconquered Walk-On, and it came out back in December of 2024. So you can go get that and check it out. But to start off the conversation, Javien, I mean, you've had so many different pathways in your life, ups and downs, and you've been through many different trials, which we know we're not, an exception of. And I wanted to start with asking you, what has been your driving force in that to continue? Because it's easy to quit. Anybody can quit, but you've even in your aspect of walking on at college. I got one scholarship offer, and I was grateful for that because I was like, you know what? At least I got one. I'm going there. But you chose to continue the dream and chase it.
Yeah, man. As far as my driving force, I think my perspective has shifted in many different ways throughout my career. Going in from not having I had 0 stars, 0 scholarships, and I didn't play football for 3 years after high school. So, my driving force in that moment was I'm trying to prove myself, and my driving force was having the goal of earning that scholarship as a walk-on, and just being able to go in there and prove myself to my teammates and my coaches. And, that was mainly my driving force during that time because I wanted to make an impact on the team. It was never really my mindset was never to just be on the team. And, some guys, they want to just have a jersey and be satisfied with just earning a scholarship as a walk-on. But, for me, I was always hungry for more. And then, more so over the career and as I've matured, my driving force has changed more towards like just doing God's will, doing God's purpose, and, finding ways to make an impact on other people's life.
And that's the perfect segue into my next question, because passion gets you going, but purpose is what eternally keeps you going through and to reach that destiny. So when was it, I would say, or ask, that you started to realize that wait, I was passionate about proving myself, and I've done that, but then now my purpose seems to be different. I think God is speaking to me where my platform is changing, and what is his goal? What is God's will for my life?
Man, even when I was walking on at Florida State and playing in the NFL, I would always have these thoughts, like looking into the future of like, man, one day I want to write a book, and one day I want to do, like, maybe turn my book into a movie because I want to be able to inspire people. But it wasn't until really the season that I'm in right now where I'm transitioning from football and, the things that God has brought me through the seasons of my life where I'm just in a place mentally where I'm trying to figure out my real true purpose and what he wants me to do. But I'm starting to realize now that everything I went through, it really was never about me. Like, it was always about, okay, how can I make an impact on the younger generation? Like, there's some, like, back in my hometown, for example, I'm from Panama City, Florida. 2 guys has made it to the NFL in the last like 20 years from there. So maybe even longer. So now it's just like, okay, how can I go back and pour into my community and give other people hope? And more so, even on a deeper level now, it's like, being able to talk about God, being able to really share how God has changed my life in a tremendous way. So it's starting to click a little bit. I'm just still trying to figure out the avenues in which he's going to use me.
Yeah, yeah, that's always that process, especially the transition out of pro sports or for something that you've done a long time into something new. God is definitely using our past to prepare us for what's in the future. And I think that's important to understand that, because sometimes we like to jump in like it's not working as fast as I want it to. I don't really know, it's not clear. But we've talked about this on the podcast before, Jason, about the clarity that God gives, and He's
Yeah.
not hiding His purpose from us. He's not trying to play hide and seek or try to make you guess. He really is a development process, and that's one thing that I've learned in retirement is that between our destiny and sometimes the deliverance part where we're like, Lord, deliver me from this hard time or this pit or whatever. There's the development process that we like to skip. So, man, embrace that development part. And I know God is calling you to great things. I wanted to ask you about those challenges too. You mentioned post high school being out of football for 3 years and then walking on. Most people would be like, you know what, like it's a wrap. I'm gonna hang up the cleats. It's been 3 years. I mean, to walk us through that, because I don't even know, I just can't even fathom going and even trying to train and work out in that time,
Mm-hmm.
and what during those hard times, and what even I guess sparked you to be like, you know what, this is the year. Even though I've been out 3 years, this is the year I'm gonna go walk on, and I'm gonna earn a scholarship and have those dreams of doing that.
Yeah, man. For me, how it kind of unfolded, like God, like man, I'm thinking of it more so like in a spiritual way. I just heard a sermon this morning too, just talking about being planted, and I'm in this online group therapy session about transitioning from football, and we were talking about planting seeds, and when seeds are planted, they're in a dark place. You don't really see the growth. Well, my first semester in college, my dad, he saw potential in me. He always saw that I could play football, but I just didn't have the opportunities. And he sent my film out to some schools, and Florida State ended up reaching out and saying like, "Hey, we'll give him a shot to walk on, but he's going to have to earn his AA degree, and it's going to be a couple years before he can come." And so I didn't really have this whole process of where I'm like training and I'm like working hard to get to Florida State. Honestly, I was trying to figure out life after football because I'm doubting myself, imposter syndrome, wondering if I'm good enough. And then two, I'm also like, I'm a regular student. I'm working at TJ Maxx. I'm working at Lids. Like, I'm not thinking like there's hope, but it's like that's Florida State. Like, I didn't get recruited. These guys are bringing in 5-star recruits daily. And so it was just one of those processes where, I took the long route, and I unveiled everything in the book, but I really took a long journey having to fall short in ways of wanting to go about things my way instead of going about things God's way. And because of that, like I took like a long journey, going to places where I wasn't supposed to go, doing things I wasn't supposed to do. And, God brought me back on track and giving me that chance to walk on to Florida State still 3 years later. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's a testament to the process in life. And everybody is not cookie cutter. It's different. Things shape out, but our decisions are important. I try to teach my children this, and my sons especially, that your decisions have weight to them, especially as you get older, and then you go down these paths. But as Proverbs 3:6 says, that when you acknowledge God, He'll make your path straight.
Mhm.
So that acknowledgement process, how did that come about when it came to God's will for your life? When you mentioned it yourself, you were like, I was in the wrong place, maybe not doing the right things, but then God's path was open to me and clear, and you chose that route, and He can redeem those things, right?
Mhm.
Um, so when did that come about? Talk a little bit about that. Like when did, I guess, Jesus and Him being the King, and not just believing in God, but having Him be Lord of your life. When did that come into play?
Yeah. That came into play, I'll say a couple years ago, where I just went through I I will say this: there were always inklings of me, like, you have these feelings of like God is probably trying to draw you closer. Like, man, I probably need to stop drinking. I probably need to stop smoking, or man, like I'm tired of fornicating. I'm tired of like, and sometimes we do it longer than expected, but it's just like God was when I look back on my life, I see the times where He was trying to draw me closer to Him, and I may have been like a little bit rebellious, but then I would say maybe around like COVID 2021 ish, 2022, 2021 going into 2022 is when I really like, you know what? It started off with me wanting to wait till marriage. Like, I got out of a relationship and I'm like, man, I'm about to wait till marriage. And then kind of just started with that. And then the more I started diving deep into watching sermons and reading, joining Bible groups and stuff like that, it's just like I was slowly starting to lose myself. Meaning, like, I was slowly like, hey, I really have to have these tough conversations with myself. Meaning, like, I gotta let the old me go. And I ended up going to Canada, and that kind of helped me out. But it helped me out in the sense of knowing if I was serious about what I was talking about. Because being an athlete, whether you in Canada or in the NFL, the temptation is there. And I had to really just find ways to separate myself from partying and just being about business and trying to stay about God, just stay focused on God. And, he slowly changed my life. I fell short sometimes throughout that process of waiting till marriage, but it was just like overall, I ended up fully submitting my life when you baptized me in Orlando. Like I had gotten saved, but I hadn't gotten baptized until like
Mhm.
years later. And that's kind of how like my process started as far as fully submitting to God.
Yeah, I mean, and that's honorable. I don't want you to think that that's, kind of just run of the mill type of story, man. Your decision to do that and to admit, like, there's failures even within it, but at least you're not faking it. Like the Lord says in His Word, don't be lukewarm, either be hot or be cold. And so, we feel that tension of, Jason, we've talked about this too, of how God will call you out or test you because He doesn't tempt. The devil tempts or tries to piggyback on the test of God to put temptation on it, but he'll test you like, yeah, you talk a good talk, but I want to see it. I want to experience it with you, and
Yes.
that's what brings God glory. And so when we talk about your book and being the unconquered walk on, it makes me think of Romans chapter 8 when it talks about how we're more than conquerors, but
Mm-hmm.
also it talks about how it's impossible to please God in the flesh and being in the spirit. And so as we seek Him, it's really true. When I read God's word, it always reveals to me how true it is when we look back and we see that trail of great grace behind us. And it's always when we've messed up. So I want to talk to the athletes out there, who think they gotta do it perfect. They gotta do it the perfect way, because when we're ingrained in us that way, right? Hey, get the perfect rep at practice and the game is gonna come natural to you. That we're not gonna do it perfect, but when you look back and you see God's grace on your life, it makes so much of a difference. And then it encourages you to keep going. And like you said, your purpose may be telling the next kid your story, telling them your testimony going forward. So take us back to the baptism at PAO. What was the conference like? Because if I'm not mistaken, was that your first attendance? That was your first time being
Mm-hmm.
there. What was it like being in a community of believers who are athletes that go through the same struggles that you do, and then being able to hear God speak to you? Because that's not always the case. Some people are like, I don't hear God talking to me, but
Mm-hmm.
Him speak to you, and being able to rededicate. I did the same thing. It wasn't my first time. I might have been like 4 or 5 times to a conference, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna get baptized because this time
Yeah.
it's gonna be my decision. You know?
Yeah. Man, you want the real story?
Yeah.
Like, I
Yes.
don't know how, but this is how this kind of unraveled. I got sponsored to go to the PAO event. I didn't even really know much about it. But as it got closer to the time of me going to the conference, I just remember fighting this heavy battle of temptation to watch adult content.
Mm-hmm.
Like the day before the conference, like it was like one of the toughest temptations. Like all day, it's like, man, like, I'll admit, like I gave in, right? I gave in. I'm not gonna sit here and fake it as if I just stood strong throughout this whole time. But so when I got to the conference that next day, I felt out of place. Like I felt bad about the day before. And I felt, even though I was amongst a lot of athletes and my peers, I felt smaller than everyone. I don't know. I felt it was just weird. And so, and I met a couple people that I saw a couple familiar faces, but I was also in a place mentally in my life where I was just kind of like not really in a good space because of how my career was going. But leading up to me getting baptized, I remember Jared Davis, he played linebacker in the league. He was a first round draft pick. Him and his wife, we were talking, and then they had asked me, they was like, "Are you going to get baptized?" And I was just like, "Nah." It was just one of the things where I'm like, "Nah, I ain't going to get baptized." And his wife, she gave me a look, not like a convincing look or not trying to steer me in one direction, but it's like, you know how sometimes we might think they saying something with their eyes, but really we just in our own heads. And so that was early that morning at breakfast. And as the day go by, I remember they made the announcement about baptisms that night. And during that sermon, I'm thinking about it the whole time that night before the baptism. Like they told you to bring your shirts if you're getting baptized, all this stuff, and I didn't do it. And when it was like 12 minutes left in the sermon, I ran up to my room and I'm like, man, I'm about to get baptized, bro. Like, came back down to my room. And when I got baptized, that was probably one of the most amazing experiences that I've ever been through, because I just felt light. I felt super light, and I really felt like God was doing, like, the old things have passed. I really felt like I was just so caught up. Like once I got baptized, I got out the water. I remember seeing Antonio Cromartie and his wife went over, covered my head in a towel because it was cold that night too, and I was just crying. And it was just an experience that I'll never forget. And when I look back on the sequence of events, I'm like, I didn't know I was about to get baptized, but maybe the enemy knew, and maybe that's why that temptation was so hard, because I've been trying to walk straight in my purity. I've been trying to remain pure, and it's like once I got baptized, I'm not going to say that I haven't faced temptations or anything like that, but I really feel like that was like a closed casket to the old me. And that was one of the best thing that I've ever could have did. And it was just an amazing experience, man.
Man, Javien, I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability on that, because it's not an easy thing to talk about that. And a lot of people will fake it in the Christian circle and pretend like they got it all together. So I appreciate that truth and honesty. And I think that's going to help people, because it is spiritual warfare. Our battle is not against the people that are walking around that we see, that's in flesh and blood. And when it's just we would be remiss not to mention, like, if you feel that, you know there's something great on the other side that God is trying to bring you to. Like now you're covered. I've heard people talking about things where they used to be in witchcraft, and like they saw a person and they were covered in red, and they couldn't mess with that person and things like that. But man, you got baptized, and the enemy was trying. His goal is to steal, kill, and destroy. And we got to realize that we walking around every day like it's a game. It's not a game for him. He played for keeps. And so, man, to be able to do that and to speak into that, man, is huge. And I appreciate that testimony, man. So, switching gears a little bit, I want to bring you back to football, bring you back to the NFL. You earned your scholarship, I think 2 or 3 years in at Florida State, and then went undrafted. So it was like a high, and then another, could take it as a low. Like, man, I didn't get drafted, but you're there. You're able to work your way. And so Take me through that moment when you know that you make the 53-man roster, and then your first game that you got to play in.
Yeah, man, my rookie year. That's my whole career going on this roller coaster, and I didn't make the 53-man roster my first year. I ended up just getting put on practice squad like that day.
Mm-hmm.
They had that 24-hour period, and honestly, I was disappointed. Like I know some people are like, bro, you didn't have any stars, you didn't have any scholarships, you were a walk on. Like, you should be proud that you made the practice squad, which I agree with. I should be proud, but in that moment, I have a high expectations and high standards of, just kind of how I want things to play out. And so I had to go through this process of just not settling, but learning how to develop, honestly, learning how to be patient and wait on God's timing, because my rookie year, I may not have played the first 7 games, but I ended up starting like the last 8 or 7 or 8 games. And it's like, I was prepared for that because that's kind of how it shaped out in college. Like, I only played 1 season in college, and I only played a total of 7 games. And that's kind of how my season went, where I didn't get a chance to play the first 5 or 6 games in college, but God came through at the right time and gave me exactly what I needed to get into the NFL. So, just being able to get over that mental hurdle of, not seeking instant gratification, honestly.
Yeah, the discipline through disappointments. That's what I wrote down.
Yeah.
It came to me just now, and I'm like, discipline through disappointments.
That's
And that's a
good.
big thing when it comes to God's will. It's not going to be it's 100% of the time not going to be what we planned out. It's not going to be the way that we plan it. And can we remain faithful through those disappointments when God disappoints you? Because it's not what you want. But ultimately, he knows better than we do. But I'm going to let Jason hop in for a second. But I want to read this verse that was in Romans that talked about us being more than conquerors, because I feel like it just encompasses your life, the book you wrote, and kind of where you're at even right now, too. 31, it says, Romans 8:31, what then shall we say these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? I wanted to read that because I just feel like that's powerful right there. If you know that God for us, who could be against us? And we should not be fearful. But then hop down to 35, where it says, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are killed all day long. We are counted as sheep for the slaughter. Yet in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. And he puts on a list there. It's not a secret. We're going to go through trials and temptations and these ups and downs, peril. It says literally we're sheep for the slaughter. But in all these things, we're more than conquerors through him who loved us. Go ahead, Jay.
So good. So good. Thank you. I call him Pastor Matt, Javien. Pastor Matt.
Yeah.
I love it when he comes with scripture. I want to ask you about your book in a second. I'll follow up with that, but I want to stay on the football theme just real quick. You played in 52 career NFL games. You got 2 picks. One of them was on Cam Newton. The other one on Jameis. And it was funny because you switched teams. You went from Carolina to Tampa, or I should say Tampa, then to Carolina, and you got a pick from your former team, which would be your future team, which is kind of fun. Do you have those footballs? And if so, hopefully you got them, and where are they?
Shoot, I got them right here. What you mean?
Right behind you.
Yeah, you got to keep them.
That's one. That's the one from Tampa where I got the interception
On Cam.
On Cam, yeah, it looks like.
Okay.
The other one is somewhere. I don't know where it's actually upstairs. I'm not gonna act like I don't know where it's at, but yeah. No,
that had to be pretty. I mean, it's one thing to play, but if you're a DB and you don't get a pick, it's kind of like, it's a stat-driven, fan-driven view of things. Oh, Matt Forte, 6,000 yard rushing seasons or whatever. But you got a couple picks. That must have been pretty cool to get that first pick and that experience in a game.
Oh yeah, because you can catch. Well, one, you do 1,000 ball drills, you might catch a thousand passes or more, like way more than 1,000 passes in the off season. And then in practice, you might catch a lot of picks in practice, but to be able to capitalize that, to stamp it in a game, especially the way that it unraveled, man, that, you know, highlights one of the favorite plays of my career.
I love that. Love that. All right, let me pivot because I want to make sure I get this question in. It's important. Why write a book? Like, why you wrote this Unconquered Walk-On book? It released in December. People need to go buy their copy, but why? I mean, you're still kind of on this journey, right? But you said, nope, this is the time. Why did you feel like God was steering you to write this book right now?
Man, it's been a long process. I started writing this book in 2021. Actually, the first time I wrote in the notebook about the book and everything was in 2020.
Wow.
And I just always had this tug of war within me of when I should release it and when I'm ready and when I'm not ready. And honestly, the whole purpose behind why I wrote the book was to make an impact on younger athletes' life, but also just generally speaking, I want to be able to encourage people that with God, anything is possible. Like, we are more than conquerors. Like, even when I was playing, like when I was walking on at Florida State, I may not have had my scholarship, but I'm thinking like, man, when I get this scholarship, like, imagine like I write this book. And, I was inspired by other people with similar stories, but I just also I just want to be able to give someone hope.
No, that's good. I was just going to say, Matt, it's a hard thing to jump into. Writing books are not easy. As we mentioned at the top, having written a couple, Matt's written one, writing another one, and you wrote yours. This is not, there's a reason why people say they would love to write a book someday and they never get to it, because it's hard. And so kudos to you that you were able to finish this up and get it published, and it's out there now and people can get their copy, because writing a book is not easy. And I would venture to say, as football players, you guys probably weren't ever thinking, I want to write a book. Like, you're so focused on your craft. And here you are with Unconquered Walk-On. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's something. It's a process, man. It's something that the Lord puts a seed in you, and there's also spiritual warfare within that. Because there's been plenty of times when I started, and I'm like, man, I can't write all this. I can't. I'm forgetting things. I'm like, oh, I can't remember what to write down, and it's a major process to get that through. But you see why it's going to bless so many people, bro. And especially your purpose behind it was to write a book, not even for yourself, not for you to be known or be famous, or for people to say, man, you wrote that book. It's for them. It's for the next generation. And I'm working on my epilogue right now because I'm addressing specifically the college, the collegiate, and the professional athlete with the platform that we've been given to do exactly that. Nice. Pour into the next generation. And that's a perfect transition into this. Probably as the time runs down, our last question is, you're in a transition phase now. You said you're in a therapy kind of focus group of those transitioning out of sports. What is God teaching you in this season right now? I'll say that.
Oh man, a lot, man. I would say one thing, I've actually hit on some of those things as I've been talking, as far as like being planted, like having a seed, not really being in like a dark place, not like in a dark place mentally, even though it's a challenge and it's tough. But I just feel like, God has more in store for me. He's just teaching me patience. He's teaching me, one, just to rely on him. The number one thing I must say is relying on him when things are stripped away. Sometimes when you don't, when the game walk away from you and you don't walk away from the game, it's like, you just don't know why. And you go into these places mentally where it's not really good places. But the number one thing I would say is to rely on him. That's the number one thing that I would say.
Oh, good, man. That's definitely something to take forward, myself included, as well as all the listeners, is to rely and trust on him. Because as I've said before many times on here, it's easy to believe in God, but it's harder to believe him. and trust him
Yeah.
in his path for us. So, Javien, thank you for your time on Sports Spectrum, and we look forward to hearing from you again.
Yeah. Appreciate you guys.
Hey, thanks for watching Sports Spectrum here on YouTube. You can click our next video, or you can check out our website, sportsspectrum.com.